What's up, everybody? It's guubums back with another comps video. The most recent patch was like probably the biggest patch that we're gonna see for the rest of the set, as well as just one of the bigger patches kind of all time. We kind of joke about it being like, you know, set 12.25 or like 12.5 kind of, just because of like how big the patch was, and there's like so many changes to like the existing comps that like I didn't really feel comfortable making a video until I kind of got more practice with it, kind of like talked to my friends a little bit more about like what's actually good. But now that I'm finally comfortable with making a comps video, here it is. As always, if you guys like the content, please leave a like and subscribe. Drop some, some feedback in the comments based on what you want to see and stuff. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. So today I have like 2-ish reroll comps, and then the other ones are going to be mostly fast 8. I think the patch made it so that it's a lot more reasonable to be playing for level 8, just because they increased the number of forecasts on level 8 that you'll see by 10%, from 20 to 22 per card, per shop card. There's a lot more reasons to be playing for level 8 now, but I also want to focus kind of like in this video, there's going to be comps that like you're not really taking, there's no specific augments required for some of these comps. There's a lot more comps in the game that are pretty dependent on kind of like hitting a +1. So you'll notice that like I'm not going to be showing Ezreal reroll. If you guys are familiar with Ezreal, that's one of the strongest comps in the game right now. But for the most part, it's only really strong if you can get 6 blaster. It's not that strong if you can just kind of like stay around 4 blaster. Frost +1 is another really strong kind of like directional early game augment that you can get. Frost Crest or Frost Crown. Same thing with Portal. I'm not going to mention any of these just because I feel like I'm trying to make a video where like you can play these, you can kind of like angle these at the start of the game before you even load into the game, right? A lot of players, kind of like the way they play TFT is that going into any given game, they have like an idea of they want to play like, one of these 3 comps. And the thing is, if I include comps that are like dependent on getting a spat or an emblem of some kind, right, then the players like looking to play that kind of style aren't really going to kind of be able to like get there. So I just tried to focus on comps that don't require any specific augments, so you can actually play these comps every single game, so long as you can find the items. So the very first comp I have for you guys is just Kassadin 3. Obviously this is a comp you guys have all seen before, and in fact this comp actually got nerfed in the most recent patch. But the reason why it's kind of the dominant way to play again is just there's going to be a couple reasons. So Ashe and Jax got nerfed pretty recently. I don't know if they got nerfed too hard in the most recent patch, but at the very least, the patch before that, they got nerfed pretty hard. So you're gonna be like less likely to go for Ashe 3 and Jax 3 on level 5 nowadays. Most of the time, you're just gonna be playing on level 6, and then you are supposed to hold every single Ashe and Jax as well while you move for Kassadin, just because it's not entirely unlikely to see yourself hitting Jax 3 and Ashe 3 in the midst of rolling for Kassadin 3. Right now, Akali 3 is really nerfed, so Akali is like kind of like a waste of gold. So for the most part, you're rolling for these, and then like if you can get like a random Hecarim, it's not the most realistic thing, but Hecarim 3 is extremely really strong right now. And there are actual comps that kind of like are centered around playing around Hecarim. But I think the way to play around Hecarim generally is just going to be like around Unleash the Beast. So it's not like that clear how you play around Hecarim 3. So I think for the most part, you're just going to be playing around like multi-strikers. And then if you get the position to reroll for an extra Hecarim 3, either on level 7 or level 8, then it's going to like really be able to cap out your board. Obviously, as you kind of like scale with this comp, you're just going to be looking to play 7 multi. However that looks like, either you have a spat and you can drop one of these, but maybe you don't and you're just going to play one of these. Itemizing these units end up not mattering. Obviously, if you have a Jax 3, you should be putting some good items on Jax. Spark, Crown Guard, BT are probably his like triple bisp, but like obviously it doesn't actually end up mattering all that much. I think for the most part, you will want a Spark or Shiv anyway, just because you're mostly playing around Kassadin reroll. But generally like speaking, like if you can leave an extra BT for Jax, that's great. Otherwise, most of the time you won't be able to, just because you need to make Kassadin items. Otherwise, just random tank items are fine. Redemption, even Sunfire in some cases, like say you can't get Red Buff or Morello, both of which can go on Ashe. Say you can't get anti-heal that way, then Sunfire ends up being fine in a pinch. But for the most part, like your Jax items are not going to be like that important, so long as like they're like the tanky AP bruiser type items. Titans ends up being pretty good if you build BT. Yeah, if you don't build BT, it's also fine. So as I was mentioning earlier, this comp actually got nerfed, and like why is this comp actually good? So there's a couple things. One, they keep buffing Hecarim. So right now Hecarim 1 is completely broken, Hecarim 2 is completely broken, and Hecarim 3 is also completely broken. Kind of like the byproduct of that is that like if you're playing around like a Kassadin reroll, if you hit Hecarim 2 in the mid game, and you have Kassadin 2 as well, there's also a lot of removers in the game. So like if you put BT on Hecarim 2, it's a lot stronger than Kassadin. So say I go just like BT Titans on a Hecarim for my mid game, Hecarim 2, then I could just remove it when I have Kassadin 3, right? And another thing is like they turbo buffed this Titans item, and they buffed Nashers as it pertains to playing around Kassadin. So how do like Kassadin items work, right? Before this patch, and just like historically throughout Kassadin's existence as a unit throughout the set, is you want BT, which is healing. You can kind of replace it with Hodge and Gunblade, but obviously BT is the best of the three. In some cases, you might have like a Radiant Gunblade or something like that. But you want BT, and then you want some sort of AP and some source of attack speed. And the 3 attack speed items that you'll frequently see is going to be Nashers, Rageblade, and QSS. So in the early patches, we kind of like played around BT, Rageblade, QSS Kassadin, but over time we kind of like figured out that that wasn't probably the best way to play around it, just because you're lacking too much AP. And the way Kassadin works isn't so much that like he overheals and goes infinite, but actually he kind of gets a big shield off of his AP. So we found out that stuff like Nashers is really strong, and stuff like Crown Guard, stuff like Archangels. So before this patch, before they buffed Titans, you were building like a lot more Archangels and Death Cap on Kassadin. But now that they buffed Titans to once again give 50 AP at max stacks, on top of the armor and armor this gives, Titans ends up being his bis. So the way you should think about Kassadin is you want 1 healing item, 1 AP item, and 1 attack speed item. The AP item could be one of Crown Guard, Archangels, Death Cap, and JG in a pinch, but mostly just one of those 3. And then your attack speed item could be Nashers, Rageblade, or QSS. Nashers is the best of the 3. And there's like a lot of ways to kind of like get the QSS effect, right? Between getting a support item or like Silver Veil, the augment. There's a couple of ways to kind of get that effect. So a lot of the support items end up being really strong for this comp. Just like taking a quick glance at the support items. Aegis is really strong. QSS is the strongest. Vow is good. Locket is insane. Moonstone's insane. And Randuin's insane. Everything else is like pretty reasonable. Zeke, Smart, like all the combat ones are pretty reasonable. But those are like the key ones you're looking out for. So if you get like say a Fine Vintage or like Support Crest, anything that lets you choose a support item, definitely look out for the options I talked about. But otherwise, yeah, this comp is straightforward. You guys have seen this comp 1,000 times at this point. Just make sure that you guys are playing around Kassadin 3, whichever one of these 3 you can, these 2 you can 3-star, and then also Hecarim 2. So playing Hecarim 2 with items in the mid game is literally your secondary carry, and it's going to be like very strong all the way up until like stage 6 probably is when it starts really falling off. And then once again, if you get that opportunity to find a Hecarim 3, then yeah, he's going to be really strong. You'll probably just win the game. Pretty basic stuff. You want Keepers and Unleash the Beast are like the main kind of augments you're looking for. Obviously, any multi-striker +1 is really nice just because it's a reroll comp, but we need Camille to hit 7 multi. Obviously, we can't get to Camille in some cases because we're stuck on 6 or stuck on 7 or something like that. So multi-striker +1 ends up being pretty solid, but it's definitely not necessary to play this comp. I think most of the time to play this comp, you're just looking for like 1 Kassadin item on stage 2, and then you have like a decent opener. You need like 1 or 2 Kassadins probably, and maybe, or you have a Hecarim, something like that. Something that lets you kind of like slam BT. BT is like a really, really strong early game slam. So if you have like a Hecarim or a Kassadin 2, you're definitely gonna be able to streak through your early and mid game and end up doing fine that way. Next comp, we have a Ziggs Reroll. It's like Ziggs Blitzcrank Reroll. I think for the most part, this is going to be your level 5 board. Either like Poppy or another Vanguard doesn't end up really mattering. I think in some cases you can go for Poppy 3. Just like if you end up having a lot of Poppies, like you're going to be rerolling Ziggs and Blitzcrank anyway. So if you have a lot of Poppies, you pick up Poppy 3. But otherwise, like just playing a random Vanguard is fine. The exact Vanguard you play doesn't actually end up mattering because we're always going to be replacing with TK. But yeah, generally like as long as you're playing 3 Honey, either one of Poppy or Cassio is going to be a level 4, and then your level 5 is just going to be the other one. And then as you kind of like level up, you just play more Arcana units. Obviously, Xerath goes in at some point as well. And this is 9 units. And you pretty much leave the Arcana proc on Ahri the entire game. Once you have like a lot of Xerath charms, you start putting, a lot of charms purchased, you can put on Xerath. But after the Xerath nerfs, Xerath charm nerfs, it's not all that relevant just because, I mean, you just need to have like too many charms for it to like break even with the amount of AP you're getting from Ahri with just like 2 3-stars. So this comp is pretty straightforward. You're slow rolling on 4 and 5 until you have Ziggs 3, Blitzcrank 3, and then you start pushing levels. I think 5 Honeymancy in the stats are really, really bad. So I noticed a lot of people are playing 5 Honeymancy. It's not that good. But if you manage to get 7 Honeymancy, you're like almost guaranteed to win the game, or at least top 2. Definitely look out for that. In that case, obviously you're going to take out some of these units. Whichever one you take out ends up being pretty obvious just because you generally want to be playing some of these for the specific kind of like the side trait you get as well, right? So say we take out Poppy, then we can just take out like Xerath and say we're playing Ahri or something just for the Arcana proc. Then like if we have Honey, then we just start playing a bunch of these Honeys. It doesn't really matter from here like what you end up playing. If you have like 2 Honey spats, you can make 7 Honey, and then that'll probably win the game. So yeah, this is a really straightforward comp. Any generic frontline items on Blitzcrank is gonna be fine. You just want some shred somewhere. Best in slot Ziggs is blue buff, Death Cap +1. I believe red buff is his best, but like Gunblade is fine, JG is fine. Pretty much any real AP item is going to be fine. And yeah, this is about as straightforward of a comp as you can get. There's not like too much to talk about with this. The other thing is like if you get the hero augment zap attack, you should just hard force this just because it is that strong and nobody will contest you. In that case, your Blitzcrank items changes up a little bit. I believe it's Warmogs, Crown Guard, Spark is his best, but the only thing you really care about is just like getting your tank items on Blitzcrank set up properly. And something to note about this comp is just to like take 2 tanky as well. It's an augment, so let me just show you guys the augment real quick. If you take 2 tanky, pretty much the way it works is it just benefits you from fielding 2 units. If you take 2 tanky, you just play 2 copies of everything, and you just fit in as much honey as you can. So in that case, in this 2 tanky scenario, you would actually play 5 honey. So let's say I play 5 honey. All right, hold on, what am I missing? I believe I'm missing Nunu. So let's say I'm playing 5 honey, then I would just want to be playing like 2 Blitzcranks, and then like 2 Nunus. And actually, it's pretty important to end up sacking these. And if you guys know about the Ziggs positioning, where you solo frontline this someone here, and then you leave another frontliner here, so that the way it works is, obviously it works on both sides, but the way it works is that some of the enemy frontliners will be pulled towards this Blitzcrank, some will get anchored onto this Blitzcrank, and then Ziggs can actually ult the backline because it leaves a gap here. It's actually something I learned from like a post I read, but yeah, it's definitely pretty important, so you can snipe backliners. But otherwise, it's actually like completely fine to corner your Ziggs as well. But yeah, this is just like some kind of like niche line to look at. If you get the chances, if you get 2 tanky, then you just keep playing infinite Honeymancers, and then like you know, you'd play an extra Ziggs. So instead of Ari, obviously, you know, we just play an extra Ziggs, extra Nunu. Any extra honey just ends up being really good. And then yeah, it's like probably a free top 4. Yeah, you're good to go. So next up, I have probably the strongest level 8 comp in the meta right now. It's just Faerie Kalista. There's really not too much to talk about. The best in slot for this build is double Rageblade, Snowblade, Warmogs, and you only need 4 items because 5 Faerie gives 2 items to both your main carry and your main tank, and you're never replacing these, so that's all you need. Last Whisper replaces Rageblade. Last Whisper, GS, Hurricane, and IE and Deathcap. Or sorry, not Deathcap, sorry, Deathblade. All can kind of replace the second Rageblade, but nothing beats double Rageblade. Last Whisper is the best once again, but it's not that important. And then you're probably just building like your standard utility, so Katarina, Sunfire, Even Shroud. It's not like that great to put on Katarina, and you don't like absolutely need anti-heal, just because Katarina does provide some of her own anti-heal. That being said, it's still like nice to have, and because the item requirement for this comp is so minimal, it doesn't actually matter what your floating items end up becoming. TG is really good. TG Cat, TG Hecarim, both end up being pretty strong. And then once you level, you just put in a random preserver. Tristana is Milio at some point as well, as soon as you hit one. And then if you have Morg 1 versus Bard 1, I think Bard 1 is stronger. But if you have Bard 2, it's stronger than Morg 1. And then if you have Morg 2, obviously you're just playing Morg 2, and this is your endgame board. Really straightforward. You just go level 8, mostly rolling for Kalista 1 and Rakan to stabilize. And then you should be holding some of these units from early game. So like 2-star Lilia is pretty nice, 2-star Hecarim is really nice, 2-star Katarina. And the thing is, once again, with all the removers kind of in the game right now, it's pretty nice to like be able to stack a Lilia in the early game, and then knowing that I won't have to sell her late game. So then I have a Lilia too for late game as well. Same thing with Katarina, Hecarim, Jax, these types of units that, you know, you might not be holding. You might not actually want to be stacking in the early game just because like you don't want to end up selling them and downgrading. But now that you actually can do that, it makes comps like this like much nicer to play. And yeah, you're much better off playing this than like some of the other level 8 comps. But there's going to be a couple other level 8 comps as well. So next up, I have the kind of like the new version of playing Ryze. If you guys are familiar with kind of like the old patches, obviously there's still a portal, which once again, as I mentioned earlier in the video, a portal Ryze is still very strong. So if you get a portal +1, either you get a spat or in the early game and you can just make a portal, or you get like a portal crest, portal crown, all that fun stuff. Portal Ryze is still really strong if you can make it to 8 portal. But once again, this video is going to be about comps that don't require a spat, right? So the best way to play Ryze now after the changes is no longer Arcana Ryze or like really kind of portal. Like portal once again is like a little bit niche. It's 4 Scholar Ryze. So it's like Scholar Preservers. After the buffs to Rakan, it just makes it so that like he's like a proper true tank, and then he actually tanks. And then they buffed 4 Scholar dramatically, so you can actually build it. And like with 4 Scholar, Rageblade actually becomes pretty reasonable. It's not like his best item, but if you have a Rageblade build from early game, then it's actually fine to put on Ryze now, just because with 4 Scholar, it actually makes Rageblade a lot more reasonable. He gets a little bit of AP as well. Obviously, the rest of them do as well. You cap out this board around Milio Morgana. There's like no real augments that you're really looking for with this comp. Generic frontline items on Taric and Rakan. Ryze benefits from being able to build Shred and Anti-Heal by himself. Obviously, like Red Buff and Morello are pretty interchangeable. Red Buff is slightly better if for some reason that's like a choice you can make. But Shiv is his best item. Archangel's his best item. This is like True Bist pretty much in some way, shape, or form. But obviously, any AP item can replace Archangels. GS ends up being built pretty often just because there's a, you need to kill your swords somehow. And Shojin is really bad in this comp because like Shojin and Force Scholar don't really get along really well with each other. But that being said, like you have a Shojin, Milio is the best holder of it. And then yeah, any generic frontline items. Obviously, you can build a Spark if you don't have Shiv, Crown Guard, Rakan. I don't know, any one of these ends up being pretty solid. It doesn't matter the exact frontline items you have. Doesn't matter the exact backlines you have, items you have. Just once again, as per usual with like some of these comps, just make sure you have anti-heal, anti-MR, and then you have proper tank items, and then you have proper DPS items. So JG is a lot more buildable now. So like if you have to build JG Ryze, go ahead. It doesn't actually matter that much. This comp is really nice just because like the item flexibility is pretty high. Same thing with this is like the item flexibility with this comp is really low, but the item requirements is really low as well. So like because I only need 4 items, even though like I kind of want, you know, these exact 4 items, I only need 4 items, right? Like I don't need 6. Whereas like this comp is like, yeah, you do need 6 items, but the exact items you build are not gonna be like not gonna matter nearly as much as like for example in this comp. And then finally we just have Karma. This comp doesn't seem like that strong to me, but there's like a lot of contention kind of like in the high-low community, especially in NA, about the power of this comp. It seems like people can't really agree because like the Gwen got nerfed really hard in the most recent patch, and like this comp I don't believe got any compensation. The way people kind of like play around Karma these days is just like they play it from Chrono +1 and then they play 6 Chrono. 4 Chrono is like an okay Karma build on a budget. So like in this case, like say I'm doing this and then I just play like Camille Jax. Like this is fine, or Camille Vex, let's say. Like this is a fine build to play, but it's not like that good just because a lot of your units are 9 Chrono units. So unless you have like a Camille 2, then you're like freezing your own board. It still ends up being pretty solid, but yeah, there's like a couple ways to play around this build. Most of the time, people are just going to be playing around Preserver and Gwen Fiora. The items are not all that important. You just want a mana item on Karma, blue buff for Shojin, ideally, and then you want a burn item, so Morello or red buff, and then final item is just like Death Cap or Shiv or something, assuming you don't have Spark. Pretty much like any random third item works. GS is fine. Gunblade's pretty bad, but Jewel Gauntlet's fine. And any real damage item is going to be fine. Fiora is always Sterak's BT +1 if you can manage it. It's a good sync of your swords, so it's like pretty nice. And then Gwen is just like some sort of hodgepodge AP items. The way they change her AI, it makes it so that like you need defensive items a little bit less. So like Crown Guard becomes slightly worse because she just ends up always dashing backwards, and she doesn't really hit multiple units anymore. I don't know. Gwen got nerfed really hard, so I'm personally a little bit skeptical about this comp. But given how much success some of like the other high elo players are finding with this comp, as well as like the perception of this comp, as well as like how playable it is, like oftentimes like if you're going fast 8, you are just going to end up playing Karma, right? It's just like the nature of TFT is the nature of playing fast 8. You just have to be open to being able to play like some of these other different 4-cost lines. So because this doesn't require a spat, it's just one of your go-to lines if you end up playing for a level 8, say you're streaking mid-game or something like that, so you take an econ augment, so you want to go 9. This comp caps really high once you hit like, you know, Morgana 2, Camille 2. You can always fit Briar on any board, so like if you go level 9 and you have a Briar 2, and you fit Briar 2, play a random shapeshifter, like most of the time that's Nico, you take out 4 Chrono, something like this. Pretty standard way to kind of like cap out your board is just like start adding some of these high value legendaries. Same with Diana. If you have Diana 2 and you can get some items on her, honestly you can just sell Gwen at that point. Like say your Gwen items were, I don't know, Gunblade. Like these are pretty reasonable Gwen items. Gunblade, Spark, and Crown Guard, right? Say you built these items on your Gwen, then suddenly we have a Diana 2, or like suddenly we have a Morgana 2. We can remove the Gwen items onto Diana or Morgana eventually into the game. But for the most part, yeah, your level 8 board is going to look something like this, plus a bunch of random units. And so like some of the difficulty about playing this comp is just like how flexible it is. So you have 6 units, 4 of them are 4 costs, so you're never going to have all 4 upgraded like the turn you go level 8, unless you're high rolling really hard or you're like extremely rich. You're just not going to have these 4 units upgraded. So you're just going to have to find a way to like bolster your board with like mid-game upgrades, and which is why like I think 4 Chrono is like one of the better ways to go about it. You could sometimes you already have a Jax 2, and then you can just play like a Vex 2, right? A much more easy to 2-star unit. Karma 2 ends up being the least important 4-cost in this comp, maybe other than Rakan 2. Rakan 2 in the past wasn't very useful for this comp, but after their comp buffs, it's actually like reasonable to put frontline items on him. Whereas before you'd actually build 0 frontline items, and you would just build Gwen, Fiora, and Karma items, and then your frontline would just be like Gwen and Fiora popping off, and Rakan would just die and be a trade bot. But now it's a little bit it's a little bit different. So yeah, like sometimes you'll have like Vex 2, and this will be your level 8 board, and then obviously you're just leveling for Morgana. Sometimes you play in Cantor. It's just kind of depends on what you have a little bit, but it's a little bit of a flex board for sure. And because like there's so many carries you can itemize, it's like unclear which carry you should itemize first. But as of right now, it does appear that Gwen is going to be the weakest of like the four costs you play. So Gwen probably gets the items the latest. So you're always going to itemize Karma and Fiora first. And yeah, this comp is probably, once again, a comp that you guys have at least some experience with from previous patches. So there's not going to be like too much to talk about. As for augments, like any basic stuff like Combat Caster, Martyr, any combat augments is going to be really strong for this comp. Econ augments in the early game help you get to this comp. And then item augments just allow you to itemize all of your carries. So there's no real way to go wrong with choosing your augments. It just, depending on what you need, you just pick that augment. Like if you need items, then you go for item augments. If you need econ, go for econ augments. If you need combat, as in you don't need anything else, combat's always going to be the strongest at some point in the game, right? So yeah, everything's going to be pretty good. And that's the video for this big ass patch we have. Hopefully I'll come up with a couple more videos in the next couple of days and a couple of weeks, next couple of patches. I know I haven't been uploading too much lately, so I'll try to get back on that. But yeah, until next time, hope you guys like the video, and yeah, peace out.